different kind of skeptic is Carl Sagan. Carl and I were classmates at the University of Chicago. I have no idea why Carl has continued to make foolish charges about flying saucers. His most recent one was that every UFO sighting, when carefully investigated, turns out to be either a fraud or a mistake. The statement itself is a fraud because every large-scale scientific study provides loads of sightings that are neither, that are obviously evidence of intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft.
UFO witnesses have not only been uneducated country folk, their number includes some very prestigious people. Former US President Jimmy Carter, in the company of some 20 other people, saw a UFO on January the 6th, 1969. He was then governor of Georgia. On the 17th of November, 1986, a Japanese airliner followed 3 UFOs for half an hour. The pilot, Flight Captain Kenju Terauchi, one of Japan Airlines' most experienced flyers, described the biggest of the UFOs as being 5 times the size of a jumbo jet. They changed speed astonishingly quickly, and Captain Terauchi stated that they must have come from outer space. There are thousands of photographs of UFOs. A controversial pioneer of UFO research, George Adamski, photographed UFOs in the 1950s with the aid of a telescope. Adamski claimed also to have seen humanoids and flown into outer space with them. Skeptics have offered dozens of explanations for this flying saucer picture of Adamski's, suggesting it could be the top of a vacuum cleaner or an ashtray. A photograph alone can never be final proof, because trick photography allows hundreds of possibilities. The final years of Adamski's life were tragic. He was branded a trickster. These pictures were taken by an American couple, the Trents, on May the 11th, 1950. Researchers regard them as some of the most reliable UFO photographs. The target of a furore, at least the equal of the Adamski controversy, was Eduard Meyer of Switzerland, as a result of his photographs and claims of having had contacts with humanoids. Even before his claims were investigated, he was labeled the UFO hoaxer of the century. Meyer claimed to have been in contact with humanoids who were replaced at intervals of 11 years, the same rhythm as the changes in sunspot activity. Creatures from the Pleiades galaxy told Meyer they were cautious about approaching humans because they didn't want to give rise to a new religion. Meyer's pictures show 5 different types of UFO. The investigation into the Meyer case was led by Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens of the United States Air Force, who studied UFOs since the 1940s.
I think the question is, why do I believe the Swiss case of Edward Meyer is a real UFO contact case? And why do I accept those remarkable pictures as real pictures of UFO? I must say that in the course of the investigation, we found not one photographer, but we found 5 photographers, 5 different photographers, all involved in this one case. They all took pictures of the spacecraft, the Pleiadian spacecraft. And on one case, 4 photographers simultaneously from 4 different vantage points took pictures of the same craft at the same time. And those were taken on 4 different cameras, 4 different rolls of film. They were processed in 4 different laboratories in 4 different countries, and they all showed the same objects. Apart from that, we took 4 of the best pictures, 1 from each of 4 different cases, to the United States with us, where we put them through exhaustive testing, for which more than $60,000 was paid for testing by every known means in modern technology. Now, in the course of testing these UFO photographs, we discovered that we can continually eliminate a process. We can always eliminate one more process known in phototechnical circles as processes for faking pictures. And we successfully eliminated all known processes of technically producing pictures and end up with something unknown. We do not know how these pictures were made unless they were made in real time, real spacecraft, as alleged by Mr. Meyer.
Wendell Stevens has definite opinions about why pilots may be so reticent in going public about their UFO experiences.
Well, few pilots report UFO sightings, although they have them frequently, because in our country at least, a commercial pilot reporting a UFO experience or a sighting or photographs from aboard the airliner, if that's the case, or a fighter aircraft, he's persecuted by first the private company, the airline company, for speaking out of turn, and each company has a procedure for reporting internally, and they do not report the information out. Military pilots have the same kind of controls on them. They are not allowed to report what they see outside of their service, and internally in the service, it's handled covertly. So we don't hear as much from pilots who have taken photographs of UFOs as we do from other people.
In Scandinavia in the 1980s, the biggest wave of UFOs occurred in the mountainous area of Hesdalen, south of Trondheim in Norway. The most intensive hunt in history was started, involving Scandinavian UFO research groups, Norwegian universities, and the Norwegian Army. The area investigated was close to a NATO base. The Hesdalen project produced a host of pictures and scientific data. In spite of the wide array of scientific equipment used, no logical explanation for the phenomena could be given. Study of the UFO's behavior did suggest they were guided by an intelligence. Investigators from Finland, the United States, and France also took part, among them French researcher Jean-Michel, who interviewed people with parapsychological powers.
For my position, it is absolutely beings from outer space who were trying to contact the people there. But unfortunately, there were not enough people ready to welcome there, to talk with them, and also there were been too much people from outside coming to the spot. Therefore, the activity is now decreasing, and UFOs are moving southwards on other places in central Norway and in the mountains.
A wave of UFO sightings similar to the Hesdalen episode took place in the Kuusamo district of northeast Finland in the early 1970s. Most of the strange light phenomena and sightings of objects were concentrated on the slopes of Finland's most southerly fell, Iso-Syrte. Strange balls of light have been seen in the same area more recently. It's been noticed in many parts of the world that UFO sightings are particularly common in mountainous regions. The reason may be magnetic fields which the UFOs possibly make use of for their avionics systems. The Finnish wave of UFO sightings in the 1970s inspired an extensive research project which wasn't supported by official or academic circles. The investigations were led by an engineer, Ahti Karavieri.
At the time of the Finnish wave of UFOs, we used every available type of photographic equipment. In the infrared area especially, we recorded phenomena that still can't be explained.
UFO sightings occur continually around Finland and Scandinavia. On August the 30th, 1986, the couple Maila and Kalle Koivunen were driving to their summer cottage for the weekend. When they parked the car and were walking towards the edge of the lake, a series of events began which turned the Koivunen's view of the world upside down.
We came to the shore and stepped into our boat, when my wife looked up and saw a light in the sky. She thought it was an aeroplane. I then glanced at the sky and saw a ball of light approaching. It grew bigger and stopped about 30 meters above the boat. It seemed to be about 4 meters across.
I asked my husband if it was a helicopter.
I said that it couldn't possibly be a helicopter because it had approached us in complete silence. Then I asked my wife for the camera so that I could take a picture of it.
I didn't give him the camera because I wanted to get to our island as quickly as possible. I was afraid of that light.
I got the outboard started and we set off at full speed for our island, but the ball of light followed us, keeping exactly the same distance the whole time.
As we got nearer to the beach, the ball shone 3 beams of light towards my husband, which made me really afraid. I thought, now they're coming to get us.
One amazing thing is that the counter on my camera showed that I'd run out of film, even though I was certain that I'd just loaded a new film. All this lasted for 40 minutes. The UFO stayed with us all the time.
The extraterrestrials observed with UFOs are said to come from many different universes and even from different dimensions. Thus, they appear to us in dozens of different shapes. Perhaps the most common physical type has a large head, big eyes, and is shorter than a human. Some of them seem to have an incredible ability to change their appearance as well as their form of speech. A lot of people who've seen them don't like talking about them, and for UFO researchers too, they're a sensitive subject.
The question is, what do they look like? You know, they're like people on this planet. There's many kinds out there. Some are 12 foot tall, some are 7 foot tall, some are 3 foot tall. I mean, there's all sizes and forms and shapes. I think the best thing to say is that the appearance they give to us is what they think we want to look at. We're really not seeing them in their true form. If they were to take off the funny face or something like that, we might be scared to death of them. So, in my opinion, what they try to do is to present themselves to us in a form that's acceptable and not frightening. Now, there's also some, like the tall ones, have sort of a square head, you know. And then, of course, you've got some who look just like you and I. In fact, there's a group called the Nordics. I know of 18, and I'll bet there's at least 7 more, so I say conservatively 25 extraterrestrial races. It's suspected that they may have as high as 26 secret bases throughout the southwest United States. That's a bunch.
Finnish Air Force personnel have sighted both UFOs and extraterrestrials, but very few eyewitnesses have had the courage to speak publicly. Among the most sensational experiences are those of Air Force technician Osmo Ljönen.
Olin ilmavoimien palveluksessa 17 vuotta.
I served 17 years in the Air Force, part of the time in air surveillance work. We had to write numerous reports, I'd say quite often, on the movements of unidentified flying objects that we'd observed, giving details of speed, direction and so forth. The objects moved fairly logically, clearly trying to avoid our radar.
UFOs first made contact with Osmo Ljönen in 1954 when he was out walking near his home in southwest Finland.
Se UFO, johon joudumme tutustumaan lähikontaktissa, oli pyöreähkö.
The first UFO which we came into contact with was about 5 to 7 meters in diameter and roundish in shape. It was the color of aluminium and hovered above the field. My brother and I had to throw ourselves into a ditch to avoid being hit by it.
Koska yhteen törmäyksen vaara näytti aivan varmalta. Olennot ilmestyivät meille kotiin keskellä yötä.
The creatures appeared at our home at midnight. The timing was odd. The clock had just struck 12 and most people were in bed. I was the only one awake. I opened the door thinking that they were people from across the eastern border, some youngsters who had come to the wrong address. As soon as they were inside, they expressed surprise that I was already up and said that I was the person they'd come to question. They had some equipment with them. I recall an object like a portable television, which they used to show certain pictures as they questioned me. As various subjects came up, they illustrated them with pictures. They also showed me pictures of events in the future, and the things they told me have, to a large extent, actually happened. Their last picture was not very pleasant. It showed an accident in which I would be the victim at some stage in my life. They told me that the galaxy from which they came appeared from the Earth as a cluster of stars.
There's been a major wave of UFO sightings in recent years in the former Soviet Union, including the Baltic republics. Thanks to the new openness in those countries, UFO research has become very active. Several big UFO conferences have been held, involving hundreds of scientists. In 1989, news of the landing of a reddish ball-shaped UFO in a park in the town of Voronezh spread around the world. Out of the craft came creatures 3 meters tall. On seeing them, one eyewitness suffered a stroke and another was temporarily blinded. At about the same time, there were several more sightings of UFOs and humanoids in Voronezh.
Recently in Voronezh, some weeks ago, there were some sightings, UFO sightings and UFO landings also. And I'd like to stress especially that not only schoolboys, not only children were observing these strange landing and sightings and humanoid, human-like beings emerging from the landed spacecraft. There was a great number of reliable witnesses among adults also. It seems to me that now there is some kind of wave of UFO sightings over the Soviet Union. And to my estimation, this number is increasing.
Abductions of people by UFOs has been a talking point in the United States for years. Among the first well-researched cases of abduction was that of fishermen Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker in October 1973. As darkness fell, an object 30 meters long landed close to the two men. Remarkable creatures emerged from the UFO. They were about 1.5 meters in height, hairless, with pincer-like hands. The men were scared out of their wits. Hickson started to beat the water with his fishing rod. Parker fainted in his arms. They were anesthetized and carried into the craft. When they reported the incident to the police, they were still close to hysteria. A conversation between the two men, secretly recorded at the police station, indicated they really believed they'd experienced a UFO kidnapping. American Bud Hopkins has investigated hundreds of abductions. Because of the loss of memory often involved, Hopkins uses hypnosis.
In terms of finding new abduction cases, I'm running into them daily. People reporting new cases. Sometimes these are new only in the sense that they haven't recall them before, but I'm also, so in other words, they may be an old case I'm just hearing about for the first time, but I'm also running into very recent abduction incidents. I have one that I've been working on that occurred in late August, another one that occurred in June, and so forth. It's an ongoing phenomenon. There's no reason to say for sure that abductions are concentrated in the United States. It is a worldwide phenomenon. One young woman I've been working with had a recent abduction, actually in August, in the United States, but in prior trips she was abducted in South America and Argentina. She's been abducted in Spain, and she's been abducted in various parts of the United States.
It's very difficult to prove the reliability of cases of contact. One of the most investigated abductions concerned the experience of the Hill couple in 1961. On September the 19th, late in the evening, Betty and Barney Hill were traveling by car on the east coast of the United States when they saw a bright object in the sky. After that, the Hills lost consciousness. When they came to, the UFO was gone, and they traveled nearly 50 kilometers south without being aware of it. Under separate hypnosis, the Hills both told how they'd been anesthetized and transferred to the UFO. Large-headed, large-eyed creatures had carried out medical tests on the couple, including taking a sperm sample from Barney Hill. One of the creatures had shown them a picture that gave the position of their home planet in relation to our universe. Phyllis Van Schlemmer is a contact whose space adventures are of the same type as the Hills.
I've had meetings with beings from other planets on UFOs twice. Both of them were completely different than the other. My first meeting was a UFO came down, it landed, I saw it, the door opened. For a moment I was very frightened, and I said, no, this is an experience, I must go with it. So I boarded the craft, and as I entered, I felt the presence of someone in back of me that I didn't see, and I entered into the inside of the craft, and there were two beings in the craft. They were well over 6 feet, formed exactly like a human, quite good looking, very, appeared to be males. They had a metallic type of costumes on and did not seem to have any openings or fastenings of any kind. Very large, crystal blue eyes, if you can call eyes crystal blue. And several years before, in my office one day appeared a space being, and it was similar to this being that these three beings, or the two beings that I had seen that was on the ship. The trip was to the moon. They put this type of helmet on. It was like a plastic helmet or plexiglass, and it had a rim all around it. It was clear. It was a double plexiglass or plastic. It had little holes around, and when they put this helmet on me, it created an atmosphere around me that I could breathe. Because I had told them, look, we're on the moon. I want to go out. You can't bring me here and then not take me out on the moon. So they put this device on me, and as I walked, it seemed that the surface kept it above ground, so it functioned in this manner. I don't know how it worked. But they opened the door, and one took one hand, and one took the other hand, and they took me outside, and I was so happy because they were holding me. I was floating, and they were holding me down. They did not have problems walking on the moon. They did not float. They may have had something to hold them down. I don't know, because their boots were the same as their clothes. But I walked around for a while, and I wanted to walk, and they held me down so I could walk in the dust like this and kick it up and so forth. And we walked around a while, and then they gave me the message, we have to go back. And they took me back in, and took me off the took the device off me. I sat down and came back, and it was when I got off the ship and then went back into the house, it was 6:20 in the morning, and I had left at approximately 2 o'clock. I asked them how were they able to do this, because I think our astronauts took a couple of days to get there. And they said that we just did not understand, that we were not technically advanced enough to understand how to go this fast.
In evaluating cases of contact, it has to be remembered that the experiences are often described either under hypnosis or as parapsychological phenomena. The Finnish doctor of medicine and parapsychologist Rauni-Leena Luukkonen has experienced a UFO contact under hypnosis.
The experiment carried out under hypnosis was done in a way that induced an extracorporeal experience, which resulted in my being transported into a UFO. People naturally say that it's just imagination. To me, it's complete reality, and it was extremely interesting to be examined inside a UFO and to meet beings of a type I had never seen before. I was able to observe 3 or 4 aliens who were about 80 centimeters in height. I couldn't tell if they were male or female.
Can you describe how this detachment from your body could have happened? How did you meet these extraterrestrials?
It is a parapsychological experience which has been investigated a great deal in the United States. There, 8 million have experienced detachment of their minds from their bodies. It is something about which modern psychiatry knows very little. But when it happens, the person feels that the consciousness rises above the physical body and it can travel anywhere. My consciousness seems to have gone to a UFO.
South America, especially Brazil, has for long been among the world's most active UFO areas. The abduction of Brazilian lawyer Antonio Villas-Boas is one of the most astonishing UFO stories. If the case hadn't been investigated with such thoroughness, it could easily be written off as science fiction. On October the 15th, 1957, Antonio Villas-Boas was ploughing on his farm when a 10-meter-long object landed near him. To his surprise, 4 helmeted creatures came out of the UFO. They grabbed him by the arms and took him into the craft. He was subjected to medical experiments which climaxed when into the room stepped an almost human female creature. The creature undressed, and Antonio found her extremely beautiful. The woman invited Antonio to have sexual intercourse, the purpose of which was to cross a human with an alien being. Later, the extraterrestrials returned to show him a small being, Antonio's offspring. Betty Andreasen met extraterrestrials for the first time on January the 25th, 1967. The beings came to her home and anesthetized her family. They took Betty to a UFO, which traveled to a completely strange place, about which Betty remembers only fragments. UFO investigators returned Betty under hypnosis to the time of her UFO experience, and she was able to recount her journey in detail. Betty Andreasen later told of encounters during which she claims to have visited a center for crossbreeding humanoids with humans. These pictures are based on her own recollections. In some abduction cases, people have gained the impression that crossbreeding experiments are not necessarily about developing mankind. Perhaps the most remarkable abductee is American writer Whitley Strieber. He seriously considered suicide until he met Hopkins, who told him hundreds of others had met the same kinds of beings.
The final purpose of the abductions, the final bottom line really can't be guessed at yet. We don't know what the ultimate goal is. I would say there's no doubt in my mind that the center of it, the focus, is on a genetic experiment involving the creation of a hybrid, of a mix of aliens and ourselves. Now, what that would lead to, what that means, I have no idea. They've been doing this for a long, long time. I just did an abduction, hypnotic regression with Charles Hickson that involved an experience in 1939. So if we can say, and I have a number of cases from the 30s, if this has been going on for that long, there's certainly been no warlike intentions. I don't think anyone can point to anything in the environment of the world that would suggest anything evil or malevolent that's come in through the deliberate actions of the UFO occupants. So they've been, let's say, peaceful for a long, long time. That would tend to make you feel there's no warlike idea, and I don't really fear an invasion. On the other hand, of course, You look at the world today, there are wars raging here and there, local wars. There's AIDS, a whole new problem we have. The environment is in terrible shape. And nobody can point to anything in the world that aliens have helped. I don't think there's anybody who can point to something and say, here's a concrete example of intervention, which has been assigned, therefore, friendliness. They seem to be totally neutral. They seem to be totally interested in their own agenda. They're not here to help us and apparently not here to harm us. Now, the fact that there's a tremendous amount of psychological damage being done by these experiences, it's very interesting and touching about human beings that we are gregarious by nature. We love to communicate. And I always am touched by the fact that there are scientists who put on bathing suits and go down in underwater tanks and talk to porpoises. Except the porpoises really don't talk back very much. There is some communication, but not as much as we would like.
UFO researchers often compared the relationship between people and dolphins with the relationship between humanoids and people. We know dolphins have brains as big as our own. It may well be that mutual caution and limited communication stem from the same reason in both cases. Dolphins command the oceans noticeably better and more harmoniously than humans govern the land. Throughout history, we've destroyed our own kind, and at this very moment, are threatening the future of the whole planet.
I think there are many different reasons for aliens to be interested in what's happening on Earth. In one of my papers, I have 25 different ones, but I think the most important reason for any alien civilization in the neighborhood to be concerned about us is that at the end of World War II, it was perfectly obvious that we Earthlings would soon be going to the stars because of atom bombs, rockets, and powerful radar. Our new technology would lead us to the stars within 100 years, which is nothing on a cosmic timescale. So if we make one assumption about aliens, that they're concerned with their own survival and security, we would expect them to want to check out all primitive societies in the local neighborhood. And surely from their viewpoint, we are a primitive society whose major activity is tribal warfare. So I think they're coming here for their own purposes to make sure that we don't bring to them our brand of friendship, which they would call hostility, I think.
If facts about UFOs are so plentiful and compelling, why aren't more scientists involved in UFO research?
I think there are more than you might expect. I've talked to many professional groups about UFOs, and I find there's a lot of interest. I think the biggest problem, though, and I wish there were a lot more, is that most scientists are unacquainted with the large-scale scientific studies that would lead them to believe that some UFOs are alien spacecraft. So I'd like to see more join me, but most of them have jobs to do and worry about ridicule if laughter curtain is real.
And there are more Close Encounters after the break when Heather Cooper requests E.T., please phone Earth. On Discovery Now, Close Encounters reveals how man is searching for other life forms in E.T., Please Phone Earth.
We come from a blue planet light years away, where everything multiplies at an amazing rate. Out here in the universe buying real estate. Hope we haven't got here too late. We're humans from Earth. We're humans from Earth. You have nothing at all to fear, and I think we're gonna like it here.
What have you got over there? Huh.
We've got something.
Well, it's quite a strong peak.
The signal came shortly after 2 a.m.
There's a moderate spike there.
Oh, that does look more interesting.
It was just what astronomer David Blair had been searching for. The signal looked exactly like a message from intelligent life in outer space.
Right. Shall we take it off the source and see if it disappears?
Yeah, let's do an integration off source, see if it goes away.
Right.
Yeah, right. Why don't you move the dish?
By moving the dish, they pinpointed the signal's origin to a star 26 light-years away in the constellation of Ophiuchus.
Okay, try that.
Okay. Here we go.
For 30 years, astronomers have been scanning the heavens like this, searching for voices from distant worlds. But before the signal could be verified, it stopped of its own accord. It never came again.
Is there anyone else out there? Do we share the universe with other creatures who can look up and wonder and think about, are we here?
Are we unique? Are we something utterly special in the universe? Or are we an example of many, many civilizations that have emerged, many, many different life forms?
Wouldn't it be a great adventure to be able to contact those creatures and to learn of their history and ways of life?
Years after Columbus discovered the New World. 400 years after Copernicus proved the Earth was not the center of the universe. And 100 years since Darwin revealed the secrets of evolution. America's space agency NASA has embarked on its most ambitious mission yet, a 10-year quest that could solve the biggest unanswered question of our age. Are we alone?
They're here.
Are we ready to start Skyframe 438?
The name of the game is SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. With a simultaneous launch in California and Puerto Rico, NASA's bold new mission has catapulted humanity to the threshold of a discovery that, if made, will shake our sense of identity more profoundly than any discovery to date.
Pull one cartridge.
At the heart of the search is a symbol of our technological sophistication. Computer microchips. SETI engines that can do the trillions of daily calculations the search requires. With powerful portable computers, coupled to telescopes at the four corners of planet Earth, NASA's marriage of science and silicon will interrogate the stars in the first systematic effort to eavesdrop on the voices of the heavens.
I think trying to determine if there's other life in the galaxy is a quest. It's a quest humankind has been on since we first looked at the sky and saw stars and wondered and speculated. Now we're just developing some tools in the last few decades to help us carry out that search in a scientific way to see if we can get answers. Nobody knows how long it will take for us to learn what is out there.
I don't know whether it's going to be me or my granddaughter or my great-granddaughter that succeeds in their generation in this search. It really may take a very long time. People that work on this project comprehend how vast the search that we're trying to do is, and how much more we're doing than has ever been possible in the past, but yet how much more there might be to do.
We reached this fascinating point in our own evolution where the scientific theory says that there is indeed likely to be life everywhere in the universe, and the engineering theory says now we have reached a time where we know how to talk to each other across the distances between the stars.
But this great attempt had its origins at a time when we had difficulty even communicating amongst ourselves.
I think it began in 1942,
when we were at war, and all the anti-aircraft radars along the south coast were blotted out by some strange signals, which initially were thought to be some secret weapon, some jamming device. But it turned out afterwards that it was radio waves coming from the sun. And the exciting thing was that, in addition to the sun, it was very soon discovered that there were other exciting objects in the sky. They were thought then to be radio stars. They were an absolute mystery, but there were other places in the sky where there were localized small sources, small angular-sized sources, emitting natural radio waves which reached the Earth.
These radio waves were part of the natural emissions of the universe. Like light waves, they ride the vacuum of space. All these radiations travel at the same speed, but radio waves are further down the dial. To catch these elusive cosmic travelers, you need a giant net, a metal dish called a radio telescope.
I sat down one day and calculated just how far could this new telescope detect the strongest signals we humans were radiating from the Earth. The answer came out: interstellar distances, the distances to the nearest stars. And what this said was that we, for the first time on Earth, had the ability to detect civilizations no more sophisticated than ourselves at the distances which separate the stars. And so it became reasonable to search, because for all we knew, almost every star was populated. Back in the 1960s, not only the ideas of life in the universe, but also even ideas about the nature of the planets were considered not very reputable subjects in science. And this is a result of a history that had occurred long before. The stories that there were canals on Mars and life on Mars, all of which turned out to be overblown and in fact, very bad science. As a result, people were very skeptical of this subject, and very few in the scientific community thought that we should devote significant resources to it.
Instead, the scientific community was spending serious money on space exploration. One by one, the planets gave up their secrets. Now we know that they were born in a swirling disk of gas and dust around the early sun. We see similar disks around young stars today, perhaps even forming similar planets in similar orbits with similar chemistries. And if planet Earth is a relatively ordinary planet, orbiting just one of the billions of stars that make up our galaxy, then the number of similar planets orbiting similar stars will be extraordinary, especially when ours is only one of at least 100 billion galaxies that our telescopes can see.
It's almost impossible to conceive that colossal number of potential life sites among the trillions of stars and planets without thinking that even if there's only a small fraction of those which have life, the number of locations where life exists is colossal.
All we know is that we look out into our own galaxy, you see something like, by sampling, we haven't seen them all, but we've sampled enough to know 300 or 400 million stars whose history and nature is like our sun. That means they're long-lasting, they're stable, they have the right temperatures, they don't explode, they don't do anything wrong. They are all possible friendly homes for planets, sun-warmed planets which can develop life. That's all we can say. If there are 400 million, it has always seemed to be an absurdity that none of them would be suns except our own. And but we can't say that's true, not at all. The logical possibility is there, but the certainty is far from it. That's why we make the search.
With this logical possibility in mind, we sent cosmic greetings cards towards the stars in the 1970s. The Pioneer and Voyager space probes carried messages telling of our existence on planet Earth, just in case any alien civilizations might find them in the far distant future. 20 years on, and only now are they leaving the solar system. So unless we can find a way of traveling close to the speed of light, we're never likely to shake hands, or tentacles, with our galactic neighbors. Nevertheless, some people believe they're already here.
I wish that they'd been there a little longer, that I could communicate with them and just to find out what it's all about.
It just passed over the top of us and the whole area was just lit up for 5 or 10 seconds.
Although UFOs have been whizzing about in the popular press for 40 years, no pieces of broken saucer have yet turned up. Scientists still have a hard time taking them seriously. So, could extraterrestrials visit us from other stars? Or are they grounded in their solar systems, victims of limited lifespans and the laws of physics, like us?
If we were to travel at our present spaceship velocities, it would take us thousands of years to get to the nearest star, something in the order of 40,000 years. Whereas if we tried to accelerate the process so that we could get there and back in a human lifetime, then the cost of the energy required goes up astronomically. In fact, we would find ourselves, for a single trip to the nearest neighbor, the star next door, you might say, spending more than 1,000 years of world energy consumption for that one measly little trip.
Forget warp speed. Forget hyperdrive. It seems we could never afford the petrol costs to keep feeding the energy-hungry engines, even if we did discover a fantastic new propulsion source.
What we've assumed is that there is no sort of super science, that you can't get here by UFOs and things like that. The only obvious thing seems to be to communicate by radio broadcasting, and the other assumption then is that they want to find out, that they're wanting to explore the galaxy, and the only way to explore the galaxy is by sending information.